Good evening. This is the July 17th meeting of the Wallingford Zoning Board of Appeals. Before we start the meeting, we'll say the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Tonight's decisions will be published in the Record Journal on Friday, July 21st, 2017, which will be the effective date your variance will take effect. The date is, and it's a date that the certified copies recorded on the land records. Statutory 15-day appeal period will expire on Sunday, August 6th, 2017. If you commence operations and/or construction during the appeal period, you do so at your own risk. First hearing tonight is 17-21, Daniel Penarski and Michael Crocker.
Applicant is requesting approval to allow customary home occupation, a hair salon, in 384 square feet, proposed second floor addition at 640 South Elm Street. Proposed salon is a two-chair salon and will service no more than 2 clients at any given time. Property is in a rear lot with limited visibility from South Elm Street. Off-street parking is clearly demonstrated to accommodate patrons.
Thank you, Mr. Rice. Will you please explain what you're going to do to the board?
Yep, what I'm planning on doing is, we're going...
Ma'am, can you give your name?
Oh, sure.
Both of you, thank you.
Sure. My name is Danielle Peniarski. I'm planning on building...
Excuse me, maybe state your address as well, too?
Sure.
Thank you.
640 South Elm Street in Wallingford. I'm planning on building up an addition so that I can have a home salon with 2 chairs and a full bathroom and a wash house or sink so that I can wash my clients or guests out. I actually had an architect come and he actually did a blueprint as well in case you wanted to see that.
Yes, would you bring, do you need that back?
No.
Okay. Thank you.
I just want to make sure. She might want to see it. Staircase.
And
Staircase.
you're only going to have, the most clients you'll have will be 2 at one time?
Correct.
Okay. And will you have a sign in front of the house?
No.
No sign, okay.
No sign and no retail will be sold in the
Okay.
salon.
I can tell by the photographs, there's plenty of parking here for 2 people, for 2 cars, besides yours, yeah. Anyone have any questions for the applicant? You have a question, Mr. Rice?
Yeah, I got a question. Is the staircase the only access?
We actually have 2, so we'll have one outside for the clients that's connected to the porch, and then there's a second staircase from the inside the home. That's for myself.
Any other questions?
Well, the reason I asked that is it acceptable for a business not to comply at all with handicap accessibility, or?
Planning and zoning perspective.
Pardon?
From a planning and zoning perspective, there's no restrictions whether or not it's on upper or lower floor, whether or not her building, she passes her building code for building permits for the accessibility it remains to be seen. So she'll have to follow that process.
We're just approving the
The home occupation,
Okay.
correct? She's showing you where in the or the relationship to the primary residence it's gonna be. I have not seen those, but I've seen the drawings that she
Okay.
submitted.
You want to pass that down to the right? Thank you. I'm all set, Bernie.
Any other questions for the applicant?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Hine?
Go ahead. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have a couple quick questions. What are your hours going to be?
My hours are going to be pretty much like a salon would be. It'd be 9 o'clock in the morning until 7 o'clock because I don't want to disturb with traffic with the neighbors. So I do want to respect, even though I'm quite close with all of them, I still want to respect the traffic and the lights and all of that.
Okay. And are you working at a hair salon now?
I actually was a instructor at the Paul Mitchell School in North Haven for 10 years and unfortunately had to leave there. And so now I'm going to be doing it on my own, which is a good thing because I'm very familiar with the sanitation guidelines for the state. And so that's why I'm branching out to do my own thing.
I asked the question because I'm interested to know whether you have sort of a client base already, or you plan on transferring your client base from where you are now to your.
I really don't have a huge client base at this point because I did teach. So a lot of the clients that I would be starting off with would be my previous students. And then building upon throughout my community. But no, I don't have a huge following as of yet.
Okay.
But my fingers are crossed.
Well, you hope it's successful,
Yes.
right? And at the beginning, I mean, do you have any sense as to how many clients per week you expect to have?
I'm shooting for in the beginning to have at least starting off 2 clients a day. If it's 5 days a week, I'm shooting for 10 clients to start off with.
And this is going to be limited to 2 chairs, right?
Absolutely. Mhm.
Are you going to have any employees?
No, my sister who lives with me, she's a barber, so she would be at times when she's not at her primary job, she would be taking clients and occupying that other chair on her off time.
Okay. But you said she lives with you, right?
She does.
Okay. I don't have any further questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Wolfer, did you have a question?
Mr. Chairman, my questions have been answered. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to speak in favor of this application? Anyone wish to speak against the application? Seeing none, I close the public hearing and open it up to the commission for discussion, etc.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to approve the application, better use of the property without altering the character of the neighborhood.
I'll second that.
Motion to approve, Mr. Desjardins.
Yes to approve.
Mr. Wolfer.
Yes to approve.
Mr. Rice.
Yes.
Mr. Ruzek.
Yes.
Chairman Bernie.
Yes, you're all set.
Yes! Thank you for your time.
The next hearing we're going to combine 1722 and 1723. Mr. Vansky, William Vansky, 18 Harrison Road.
On 1722, special exception, applicant seeks special exception to allow total garage area of 3,234 square feet where a maximum of 936 feet is permitted to construct a 2,394 square foot detached garage. Property has existed detached garage of 840 square feet. Property also has 4 additional accessory buildings totaling 1,919 square feet. Applicant proposes removal of these 4 accessory buildings in order to construct 2,394 square foot garage. This office suggests the 4 accessory buildings totaling 1,900 or 1,219 square feet be removed as a condition of approval for any special exception approval. This office also has concerns that the total garage area requested causes the dwelling to be subordinate to the garages. On 1723, the application is companion to special exception 1722. Applicant requests garage height of 20.5 feet where a maximum of 15 feet is permitted to construct a 2,394 square foot detached garage. This office cannot support granting of this variance as no hardship can be determined and alternate design can reduce, if not eliminate the need for a height variance. 2,394 square foot garage area does not automatically perpetuate the need for a 20.5 foot height to accommodate adequate roof pitch and meet local bearing building requirements. Rather, the desired wall and overhead door height placement necessitates added height. Further consideration should be given to the alternate placement overhead door and/or height of walls overhead door. There's also a paper from, I believe, looks like it might be Health. Says distance to septic proposed detached garage is acceptable. And I believe that's it, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr.
Back
Nice.
to you.
Please introduce yourself and explain the application.
Good evening. For the record, my name is Joan Malloy. I'm an attorney with the firm of Lachlan Fitzgerald. My office is located at 150 South Main Street here in Wallingford, Connecticut. And sitting with me at the table to my left is Mr. Vansky, who is the applicant. As indicated from the information you have from Ms. Torrey, there are actually two applications which are related to a proposed detached garage that Mr. Vansky would like to construct at 18 Harrison Road. As you are aware, these are actually separate applications, although companion. I'm going to talk about them separately because they're a little bit different, but obviously there will be some overlap in terms of the information. As the special exception is listed first on the agenda, I thought I'd start with that one. As it indicated, the applicant seeks to construct a 2,394 square foot detached garage. Mr. Vansky's son is involved in tractor competitions, so they have a large covered trailer, tractors, and Mr. Vansky also has a large pontoon boat. There are also some other motorized recreational vehicles. And Mr. Vansky would prefer to keep this equipment indoors rather than to store it outside. Indoor storage presents a much more aesthetically pleasing look for the neighborhood, as well as protecting the boat, the tractor, the equipment, the trailer from harmful weather effects. Mr. Vansky did discuss his application with town staff. Based on those discussions, he worked with the building manufacturer to try and see if he could reduce the size of the proposed garage. The size of the building is dictated by the standard dimensions offered for these types of structures and the need for the oversized garage door to allow the boat and trailer to get in and out of the garage. The minimum allowable height and width for the garage door is 14 feet. And even with the 14-foot high door, the railing on the top of the boat has to be removed in order to get it into the garage. Mr. Vansky did provide me with two pictures, which I'm going to submit. I have two copies of each. The second one actually, to give you some perspective, is Mr. Vansky standing next to the pontoon boat. It is out of the water. The other one is the vehicle at a gas station. And if you've ever been to a gas station, the overhead is like 14 feet high. And you will see how close this is in terms of the distance to the top of that. So we want you to understand there's an actual reason that is driving this. So with your permission, Mr. Chairman, I'll give you these two copies. Mr. Bansky has discussed his proposal with his neighbors. I have letters which indicate that there are no objections from the neighbors to his application, both for the special exception and for the variance. And I'm going to give you folders that have those letters in them. In addition, although we have not yet gotten to it, there are some, as pointed out in Ms. Torrey's memo, some structures, accessory buildings on site that are going to be removed, and there's some pictures of those structures to show you the ones that will be removed. And again, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to pass these out.
We don't share well. Thanks, John.
I would like to reassure the board that Mr. Vansky is not intending to use the garage for anything other than storage of personal possessions. There will be no commercial use associated with the garage. As I said, its sole purpose is to provide an indoor storage for the trailer, the boat, the tractors, and other motorized equipment. And I believe this is noted on the plan that was submitted to you and Ms. Torrey's memorandum, Mr. Vansky is prepared to remove, I think there's 4 accessory buildings that will be removed. They currently total 1,219 square feet, and certainly should the board be willing to act favorably on the special permit application and you wish to make it a condition of approval that those structures be removed, the applicant has no objection to same. Ms. Torrey's comments to the board, it appeared to me that her primary concern was whether the large detached structure was truly an accessory use. In addressing this issue, I went back to the zoning regulations. I looked up the definition of accessory use in the regulations, and it just simply says it's a customary and incidental and subordinate to the principal use or building. Nowhere in the definition does it reference the size of the structure as being defining as to what is accessory. It's the use. The primary use is a residence. The accessory use is the storage of personal possessions owned or used by the resident of the home. This would be somewhat different than if you went to the definition of accessory apartment, which clearly states that the apartment has to be subordinate in size or smaller in size than the primary residence. I looked at other definitions. I looked at the definition of dwelling. There's no reference to any size requirements. I looked at the definition of a lot. It just references principal building and accessory buildings, again, without reference to specific sizes. I even looked up the definition of principal building, and again, it's simply defined as the building which accommodates the primary use of the lot, again, without reference to size. I then went to section 4.1 of the zoning regulations, which covers the R18 zone where this property is located. Again, single-family dwellings are an approved use, no reference to building size. Section 4.1D7 allows garages exceeding the size limitations contained in section 6.2 by special exceptions. And again, it also says in section 4.1F3, it does allow private garages and other accessory buildings subject to 6.2. So therefore, it does permit structures of various sizes, provided if it exceeds the limitations in 6.2, you have to come to this board and get a special exception. So large accessory structures are not prohibited under the regulations. Section 6.2 of the zoning regulations is the section that covers detached garages. It states that by right, a property owner can have a garage equal to 936 square feet, or 50% of the livable floor area of the house, up to a maximum of 1,800 square feet, whichever is greater. The regulation does not prohibit structures larger than 1,800 square feet. It simply states that that the person wishing to have such a structure must come to this board and obtain a special exception. My client's lot, if you had a chance to look at the survey, is larger than the minimum required in an R18 zone. R18 is essentially a half-acre lot. His lot is 1.5 acres, so it's 3 times larger than what is required under the regulations. The lots that are proximate to my client's lot are also, in most cases, greater than half-acre. The ones on either side are substantially greater than half-acre lots. Article 9 of the zoning regulations governs what this board should consider when deciding applications for special exceptions. Subsection J discusses the board's obligation, which include considering the standards in the regulations as well as some generalized standards. The first section, 9.1J1, asks the board to look at the proposal to determine if it's in harmony with the development in the area based on factors such as nature, location, intensity, and size. While a generalized standard, while this generalized standard asks the board to look at size, the section does not contain any specific standards for judging size. Regulations must have standards so that applicants can be sure that the same standards are applied to them as to any other applicant. What is the standard that are in the regulations from all this? You can have a structure of the size requested, subject to the board approving the special exception. Section 9.1J2 allows similar review, but is tied to traffic concerns. Again, the storage of motorized vehicles, a boat, a trailer, I do not think is going to create any traffic considerations. And the third thing asks to look at the impact of the proposal on the future development of property values, based on the comments from all the abutting property owners indicating that they have no objection to the proposal. I would argue that at least the people in the immediate neighborhood do not believe that allowing this structure is going to impact their neighborhood or their property values. Based on that, on all of those things, I would argue that the application does meet your standards and your regulations and request that you grant the special exception. Now, with regard to the variance, that has to do with the height. And again, many of the comments that I made during my presentation about the special exception would also apply. Obviously, one of the concerns is, did he need to have a garage door that's 14 by 14, as evidenced by the photograph of the boat that he's trying to get indoors, especially in relationship to the when it was at the gas station and it was under the covered canopy. He does need that 14-foot door in order to get that boat on the trailer in the structure. If you're going to have a structure of the proposed size, obviously there are code obligations. You have to be able to get a roof structure that can handle the size of that, the length, the width, and then you have to deal with, as Ms. Torrey pointed out, the load bearing. What does the code require? We live in Connecticut. We get snow. If you look at the drawing that was submitted, you'll see it's a very low pitched roof. So it's like a 412 pitch rather than 8 to 12 pitch or a 10 to 12 pitch. So it's not a very steep roof. But you do need a distance between the top of the garage door, because obviously you have to have the mechanism by which the garage door opens and closes, and then you have to get, whether they're trusses or whether it is, stick-built, if I can use that term, that structure has to be above all that. And that's what's driving the size, the height variance. And again, we've tried to make it as low as possible to minimize that, but that is actually the minimum distance and height that you can do in order to get the boat and the trailer into the garage. Ms. Torrey talks about where is the hardship. Okay, so I think the hardship is in the regulations itself. You have regulations, as I've indicated, that do not prohibit garages in excess of 1,800 square feet. You can have a garage larger than 1,800 square feet. You just have to go through a process. But if you're going to have a structure of that size, it still limits you to 15 feet in height. And that just, how do you comply with the building code requirements, the load-bearing requirements, if you need to do those? And I just think that allowing it one way, but then putting the height limitation on the other just creates such a difficulty, because you can't make, basically you're saying build a flat roofed building. And you couldn't do that in this case because, again, you need the 14 feet and you need structure above that to get the garage door open and closed, plus the structure to support the roof. And I don't think anybody thinks a flat roof is a good idea in Connecticut or New England. So again, it's based on, shall we say, as I would say, the conflict in the regulations, allowing one thing but limiting the ability to really implement what is permitted under the regulations is what's creating the hardship. So in any end, I would argue that there is a basis for determining that the literal enforcement of the regulations creates an unreasonable hardship and that the application for the variance should be granted. That's my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions. Mr. Bansky's here as well if I don't know the answers to questions.
I have a question on the width of the boat.
Yes.
How wide is that boat?
8 feet wide?
Yeah.
8 feet wide.
And why do you require a 14-foot wide door?
Well, there's also the trailer that they're using to haul the tractors. I'm sorry, I didn't bring a picture of the trailer because as I said, Mr. Vansky's son is involved in tractor pulls, like he goes to Durham and whatever, and he actually has a covered trailer so he can bring the trailer and the associated equipment. So the normal garage door, I think, is like 10 feet at least, some are 12 feet wide. So this is a little bit bigger, but again, when you're trying to get these structures, these types of pieces of equipment in, you need a little extra room so that you don't hit it.
And how high is the boat when it's on the trailer, do you know?
13 feet, 4 inches. And that's with the railings off.
That's with the railings off.
Okay.
Railings are another 30 inches.
Anyone else have any questions for the applicant? Mr. Desjardins?
Thank you. So my first question was, I'm just looking at the map that you provided here, and I just want to make sure I'm very clear
Okay.
about where the structure is. Would you mind pointing it out on the large map for us, please?
It's a little bit difficult because there's all these right-of-ways, but Mr. Vansky's property goes like this. And the proposal is to eliminate these structures and to place the garage in this approximate location. Does that help?
Yes, it does, thank you. On the variance, one question that I had was, is there a design for the garage? I know you noted that you would need a height, an extra clearance of at least a foot or so for the mechanism for the garage door opening from bottom to top. Are there designs that open from side to side that would maybe place that mechanism in a different location or just be a manual?
I'm personally not aware
Okay.
of, at least for these types of structures, ones that open
Okay.
side, French door, is that what it's called?
And then my last question is, given the height issue, I understand this is probably a building that a manufacturer sort of has ready to go. Have you looked at other buildings that might be a little bit lower in the peak of the roof that might also meet your needs, or?
Nobody really recommends less than 4 inches of pitch on the roof.
Okay. And I guess for Amy, I know there's a note here that says there might be alternate designs. I don't know if the office had looked into any of that at all.
We didn't look particularly into it. However, a structure of that size, of which I own a ranch home of that size, is not 20 feet tall. The height is very difficult to support because it's based on the need for 14-foot doors and walls. There's the prefab structure. We suggested that alternate plans may be found, whether it's being constructed from a builder for single custom plans. It's certainly more costly. However, I believe in alternate door mechanisms, side to side versus overhead, that we did not particularly investigate. That was the applicant's to do.
Okay, but you...
That was our
believe-
suggestion, that it be looked into.
And I apologize, I don't want to put you in an awkward spot here, but you do believe, or someone in the office believes, that it is possible to have some kind of an alternate design that might accommodate the 14-foot door?
Both, roughly sketching, the town planner, Casey Costello, and myself did suggest that perhaps moving the door, and yes, the discussion did arise where trusses or roof supports would need to be over and above the door again, though we're back to the door. You want 14 feet high. It's very rough to find the hardship in needing 14 feet high.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else have any questions to Hein?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Earlier you had said that the hardship emanates from the regs. But isn't the hardship really emanating from the particular use of the property? I mean, if Mr. Vansky, if it was me, I would grant every one of these things, but we're really stuck with the regulations.
That's correct.
And that's what we're limited by.
Correct.
I mean, if Mr. Vansky had a regular sized car and he didn't have a tractor or he didn't have a boat, there wouldn't be a need for a variance, correct?
All right, so we need to be clear here that we're talking about two things. The size of the garage is the special exception, okay? And the regulations do permit garages in excess of 1,800 square feet. So the regulations do allow and recognize people have stuff. And people want to get this stuff inside. You know, personally, I hate it when I go by and the person's got the motorhome with the blue tarp over it because they're trying to provide the protection in the bad weather.
Sure.
I'd much rather see that thing in a structure, personally. Again, I'm speaking personally. So as you're aware, because you've been on the board, people come to you and say, we would like to do this. So the regulations do permit the use, if we want to call it that. But because of the types of things that we want to put in the structure, or Mr. Vansky wants to put in the structure, is what's causing the height request. And you're right, it is his specific boat that's a true driving force that's making the size of. But the regulations say you can have a big structure, but then they, in a way, are punishing you if you try to exercise your right to have that structure, because it's not realistic to expect you could have a structure of this size and not need some height for the support, and recognize that you may have more than a typical car that you're putting in here. So the use allows it, it's just the height limitation that doesn't go along with the size of the structure that is permitted, again, subject to the board's approval for structures over 1,800 square feet. And that's where I see the
Sure,
problem.
But it sounds, that argument to me seems to be an argument for a change in the regulations. The regulations, as they stand now, are what they are, and then that's what we're stuck with. And the reason you're seeking a variance for the height, a height variance. And the reason why you're seeking that variance, from what I hear you saying, is because of the size of the door in order to get these items into the garage.
Well, I don't think it's just the door, okay? I mean, I think that's the primary driving force. But again, if you have a larger structure, okay, when you do the larger span, you need a stronger support system for the roof, because you want something that can handle the weight as you do that span. So the reality is, by allowing a larger structure, you're accepting the fact that you have to have a greater roof support system, which in turn, in my opinion, drives up the height of the structure, because otherwise, what are you doing? You're eating up the usable space. What good is an 8-foot car, a garage, if the structure starts really low? I mean, you have trouble getting your car in and getting out without hitting your head. I wouldn't, but other people might. But that's the thing that I'm trying to get across. If the regulations allow this, and you're right, maybe the regulations should, consider having more flexibility. When the Planning and Zoning Commission went in and altered that, but they didn't do it. So my client is stuck with the regulations as they exist. And again, if there is some conflict with those regulations, the relief is to this board by way of seeking a variance.
But the standard for a variance then is that it's got to be an undue hardship that emanates from the land, a particular characteristic in the land itself, not by the use that's being made of the land. So
I don't think it's just the land. I think, again, it can be the application of the regulations to a specific situation. And again, I think that this conflict between the two provisions in the same section of the regulation is the type of thing that creates grounds for a hardship.
Okay.
My opinion.
Yeah, fair enough. And then I think if I understood you correctly earlier, I think you were making the point that there's no provision in the regulations that require a garage to be subordinate in size to the house.
Correct.
When I sort of have a different reading, because when I take a look at section 6.2 in the regs, it says that the garage can be 936 square feet, or now there's very few houses I think in town that are 936 square feet, or 50% of the livable floor area of the house up to a maximum of 1,800 square feet, whichever is greater. And to me, when I read that, I read that as saying, I mean, they're tying it into the size of the house. And the way I read that is, hey, we don't want people to have garages that are larger than their homes. We want to make sure that we're encouraging reasonable development of residential properties. And
But if you
we
read
could disagree.
that section, it says you can get a zoning permit. So that means you don't really have to go to the Planning and Zoning Commission, you don't have to come to the Zoning Board of Appeals. It's by right. I mean, obviously you have to apply, get your building permit and all that other. So by right, you can do that thing. It's when you go over that 50% mark that you have to come get a special exception. So I can understand how you interpret it, but I look at it very differently because it says I can do it by right, no question, if I'm at 50%. If I want to go more than that, then we want somebody to look at it.
Right, and I agree with you there. No, I agree with you there. I guess my concern is just that I want to make sure that we are not encouraging, because if we grant this, the next person that comes along, you know, is going to argue, well, you granted Mr. Vansky's application earlier. And my concern is that we don't end up with a number of small houses with garages that are larger than the house itself. And that's my only concern.
You've already got those in Wallingford.
I know, and it would be good to limit how much more that we have.
It seems that, again, this is a generalization, but people are accumulating more things, and people want to store those things. I mean, back when it was just the 936, I was always in front of this board arguing, people now have 3 cars, some people now have 5 cars. And then they have their lawn equipment and their pool equipment, or, you know, their bicycles. And there's no place to put it, and nobody wants to look at it. So they want to put it indoors. So, you know, this perception of the house with the 2-car garage that was a big house and a big garage when I grew up, that's not what people want, that's not what people need anymore.
Yeah. Fair enough. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
Yes, Mr. Rice.
Let me get this right now. There are 2 properties here, correct?
Oh, as far as the assessors is concerned, it's considered one property.
There's 2 homes on one piece of property then, correct?
No.
No, there's 2 separate lots,
There's 2 separate lots.
2 separate
I can
houses.
show you.
Okay,
They're just
but
both-
they're owned both by
Me.
Mr. Vansky, correct?
Correct.
Does that have anything to do with the amount of square footage that would be allowed?
I don't think it changes things. I think the same regulation applies regardless. But I think it provides some reassurance for this board that we're not building a huge structure on a little lot that's going to overly impact any of the abutting property owners, that the parcel is large enough that it can handle this structure without having a negative impact to the neighbors.
And most likely, this property will be retained for many years, correct?
Correct.
Mr. Vansky's not
Well,
planning
maybe
on
you can
going
answer
anywhere.
that, Mr. Vansky.
Yeah, it'll go to my son, his 2 sons, and probably another 80 years.
Okay.
Anyone else have any questions for you? Mr. Wolf?
Mr. Chairman, thank you, sir. A question for Joan or
Yeah.
the applicant. If I visualize this here, I can barely, this tree line here, is that still going to remain the same there? You're not going to cut any of this down?
No, that's all coming down.
No, the sheds.
The tree line.
Oh, the trees?
Yes,
The trees are our neighbors. Those ain't even ours.
they're your neighbors. And is that Mr. Aguilar's house in this picture? Way over here? I mean, it looks like it's a long way away.
It could be. That's about where we live. He's up on probably a few hundred feet away.
And the new shed is approximately going to be going in the location in front of this tree line, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's actually about, I want to say 50 feet from that tree line.
50?
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Anyone else have any questions? The four existing sheds are going to be history, right?
That's correct. If the board chooses to approve the special exception and wishes to make that a condition of approval, the applicant has no objection because that's his intent anyway.
I would rather see this housing whatever he has rather than those four sheds. Yeah. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to speak in favor of this application? Anyone wish to speak against the application? Seeing none, I close the public hearing and turn it over to the board.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I'm going to make a motion on 17-022. I'm going to make a motion to approve this application.
That's a special exception,
Yes,
correct? Yes.
special exception. With the provision that the four sheds totaling 1,219 square feet be removed and better use of the property without altering the character of the neighborhood.
Second?
Motion to approve, Mr. Desjardins.
Yes to approve.
Mr. Wolfer.
Yes to approve.
Mr. Ruzek.
Yes.
Mr. Rice.
Yes.
Chairman Bernie.
Yes. Special exception is approved.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes?
I will make a motion on 17-023 for the height variance. I'll make a motion to approve the application. Better use of the property.
Second?
Motion to approve, Mr. Desjardins.
No.
Mr. Wolfer.
Yes to approve.
Mr. Ruzek.
Yes.
Mr. Rice.
Yes.
Chairman Bernie.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
That can, tonight's hearings. I'll entertain a motion for approval of last month's meeting.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? No. New business or continuing business?
I think it's continuing business.
Mr. Rosick, you want to?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, we have a letter from Amy Torrey, what we discussed last month on having a workshop with attorney, Corporation Counsel Janice Small. I'll read it for the minutes here. Please consider this follow-up to a memorandum from Janice Small, Corporation Counsel, to members of the Zoning Board of Appeals dated May 31st, 2017. As per discussion at the June 19th, 2017 Zoning Board of Appeals meeting, setting a workshop to review the legal principles regarding variances with town legal staff would be both informative and timely. You will note the agenda for July 17th, 2017 meeting has a discussion item for this workshop. This discussion will set the scope of the workshop by determining topics of most relevance and urgency in order to set an agenda and allow ample presentation preparation time for the law department. Some suggested topics may be FOI review, defining unusual hardship, procedures for public hearing, what must be stated on the record, elements for proper motions, reason for granting a variance. I will advise the law department of results of the ZBA's discussion, schedule the workshop, and advise all participants of the details. I look forward to this beneficial session. This is from Amy. So I guess we should discuss Probably, Amy, you want to know exactly kind of what we want to discuss with Janice?
That's basically what we're trying to do, set the scope. As per a discussion that I had with corporate counsel, she advised it may be simpler to structure a workshop or a session around some certain topics of, the most important, most relevant. So I put in some suggested ones. Certainly that's for you all to decide, but then she can design the presentation and the discussion that we'll have. I would also propose, as well as a possibility, that our next meeting on August 21st perhaps could include that session. If, it would give her ample time to prepare. We will have to have a motion to change any timing of a meeting and such, but we'll cross that bridge. But just that's something to consider. But what would you like to see as most important topics?
I think all these topics that you have listed are very good. I think that's a good start myself. I don't know what anybody else got to say.
I agree.
I think we could use possibly some new reasonings for passing a motion for, we all got stuck using the same one. It's been for years. But I think that would be a good start for discussion, and if the meeting produces more questions, then we maybe sit down and meet again. See what everybody else has to say.
We concur.
Anyone else have anything?
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Mr.
I had one other thing that I thought might be helpful for me. I think we're all familiar with special exceptions, but I would be interested, just from a legal point of view, in special exemptions versus variances, the differences that we have to show in our motions. Thank you.
Great one as well. If we have more than, 2 or 3 topics, then I would ask that we sort of prioritize them. Maybe we'll have, 2 of them initially, and if there's a need to follow up, we could follow up, something to consider.
How about if Janice, I don't mean to put any work on anybody else, but if she put some sort of packet together with suggestions, and we could review it and then sit down and have a quick conversation about it. It'd be something we would have ahead of time. We could look over her suggestions. We could meet in the room over here, maybe, I don't know what everybody's time before the meeting, a half hour before the meeting, have a quick conversation about it. That way we would have, if we had her suggestions for these topics, some of this stuff, we could read it ahead of time and would shorten the meeting up a little bit.
I think that's what her suggestion was, although to have it, set the scope and have it not be long, and she will certainly present you with all materials ahead of time in advance, so there can be some discussion and questions, and that being the purpose of deciding your topics, if that makes sense. So you won't just find out that evening, in other words.
Well, I didn't realize, I didn't understand it that way, that's why I
Okay.
suggested it that way, but only because.
If I wasn't clear.
Our meetings are 7 o'clock and people might be getting out of work and, trying to rush here, so.
It was just a thought. It doesn't
we-
have to be on the same meeting night, just a light agenda, happy
But
to
I
notice.
think if everybody's coming here and if we could do half hour earlier,
Can we do it or not?
I don't know. I think if maybe we got the material ahead of time, we might be able to. I don't know, just a suggestion.
We could allot that amount of time with some, and with some follow-up as necessary. Just trying to prevent the need for you all to have to come on an alternate day or
Well, we
During the
probably should
workday.
have our meeting with Janice, not the same night that we have a ZBA here.
that's potential as well, if that's something you'd be open to. I don't know folks' schedules, and I would be happy to.
It's up to you, John. If that's what you want to try, you can do that.
What do you want to do?
I've been to workshops, and I certainly wouldn't want to sit through one if a meeting went kind of late here.
I couldn't agree more. So, an alternate evening, I'd be happy to look into an alternate evening, check with her availability. I'll be happy to broker sort of that arranging, if that's something you're conducive to, an alternate evening. We'll set a workshop night.
Okay.
Doesn't have to be at the meeting, it was just because it happened to be a light agenda. If we took an hour for that and an hour for agenda items. Just a suggestion.
Mr. Chair, just speaking as one of the folks who usually gets here right before the meeting starts, I can make an effort to be here earlier if that makes a difference for others. I don't know what everyone else's schedule is.
You know, it's been my experience that a workshop, as I view a workshop, and a meeting on the same night never works. It just doesn't work.
Fair enough.
Because maybe you might not realize about how long the meeting is going to go, but you run into a hearing that goes much longer than you anticipated. So I think that our meeting with Janice has got to be on a night that we don't have a meeting. Or maybe, well, you never know how many hearings there are going to be on a particular night. But
I will be happy to set that up and sort of offline or outside the meeting, to connect with you all to see what night will work, as long as that's what you would prefer and you're more conducive to an alternate evening. I certainly will look into structuring that.
And I don't think that, probably you wouldn't get to that anyway. I don't think we should schedule anything until probably October. I know, vacations are in August, and I'm going on vacation in September, and I have something scheduled in the beginning of October, so.
You let me know how quickly, I think it's prudent that we move as quickly as we can on it, with the understanding certainly that there's summer obligations. September, perhaps? That's something, mid-September, I mean,
September, I'm going to be on vacation.
Oh, the whole month?
3 weeks.
Oof,
Nice.
I'm gonna be,
end of September?
I'm gonna be gone this middle of the month.
Thoughts? Somebody help me out here.
I just had a thought on the actual topics. I think maybe whatever Attorney Small and you maybe might prioritize the important topics, because I think this was kind of spurred by, maybe concerns that you or Attorney Small had, so that might be helpful. If you would maybe were to prioritize, if you see that we're doing something, that we could easily fix, that maybe you could prioritize those, and then if she had maybe had like some time for a question and answer at the end for anything that comes up, topics in addition to this, maybe, once we hear her presentation, we might have some further questions, so, but I agree that the topics that are on this letter, I think, would be helpful to go over. And as far as timing, I'm pretty open to whenever is good with everyone else, so.
So I'm understanding that the general consensus is it will be an alternate to the next meeting, if I'm understanding correctly, that we're not going to do this on the agenda for the next meeting.
Correct.
Correct. We're moving toward the more separate workshop.
Correct.
Okay, and timing isn't of an issue. Is everybody in agreement that?
Well, let's maybe discuss, July's definitely out, August. Is there anybody that has, let's say, are you available, what aren't you available in August, Christine?
First week of August, I'm unavailable.
Frank?
I'll be with second week.
Second week, first week, okay. Ray?
Probably either the second or third week.
Okay.
Haven't decided.
Joe?
I'm available except for the last couple of days in August.
So the whole month?
Yeah.
You're good for the whole, Joe, are you?
I'm looking. So it looks like the week of the 21st to the 25th, I'm not available.
That's your regular meeting, so you're not.
Oh, I'll be here for the 21st. I
Okay.
can come the 21st, but then the rest of it,
So the rest of the meeting.
yeah.
That's the third, so you're the first, you're the second, you're the third? Oh, boy.
It gets hard. I think Bill, Mr. Bernie is correct, and I know as much as maybe we should think about doing this as quick as we could, but realistically, with everybody's schedule, I know I'm gonna be away in September. I don't know if I'll be back
We never got down this far.
I'll be back the 16th, so I'll be back for the meeting. But,
I won't be here for the meeting.
but then
How-
October, I'm leaving, I'm away too. So I mean, I think maybe we should,
Amy, excuse
it gets hard.
I have a suggestion, and I don't know if this will work. I mean, obviously you said that the week of the meeting wouldn't, but if we targeted 2 separate sessions, one in August, one in September, at the end of the month, around and about, perhaps it might mean 2 meetings in a week, since it seems to be the meeting dates are here. Maybe the last week of August, in this case, a week later than the meeting for a workshop, and then perhaps the last week of September or the 3rd week of September as a follow-up. That
That sounds okay with me.
Well, it might be helpful too if, because I know.
If we had email and I could email you all.
If the timing, is important to get this done sooner, if maybe the information could be sent to us, and then at least we can
Sure.
read it. And then when we have the meeting, if there's further questions, but at least we'll have the information that you want us to have in a timely manner, as opposed to waiting until September.
Here's what I proposed then, based on this discussion. We have the 3 topics that I submitted. We also have the additional for Mr. Desjardins regarding the differences between special exceptions and variances. It's a great one too. So 4 topics, I would propose 2 for each session. Biggest priority being the procedures and the reasons and such for the variances. I think that's top priority, I think, and of a timely importance to do that correctly. And I will ask the corporate counsel if she has availability those last 2 weeks of both August and September to split it in 2 and provide materials for each as soon as she has them completed. Fair enough? And then I will communicate with you all via telephone and
Sounds good.
such to organize dates and, rather than waiting for meetings to do so.
Sounds good.
Sound doable? All right,
You?
then I will be in touch again
Go for it.
via telephone to, get things scheduled quick. And we'll divide them in 2 topics per, with the most
Yes, ma'am.
pressing coming for the end of August. Thank
Okay.
you. I think it'll be beneficial. Thank you.
Your motion to adjourn?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.